Welcome to this parts presentation. In this video, we're going to take a high-level look at parts for Altium and what parts can do for you. A little bit about me before we get started. I'm your host, Randy Clemens. I'm a professional PCB designer, certified IPC CDI+. I'm a self-employed contractor. I'm also an Altium beta team member. I was also participated in Altium Live BattleBot and was a champion on Team Zeta. I'm also the current San Diego Altium User Group Chairperson. If you'd like to know more about my work background, you can find my resume on LinkedIn. Okay, enough about me. Let's get into the presentation. We'll make some demonstrations here soon, but I just want to quickly go over some of the high-level things that you can expect to get when using parts. Just a real quick look at parts. Parts is a database and a database front end. So this is a look at the raw database, and it's an example database that you can download. We'll put the download link in the description below, so you can go there and download the database. Anyway, it looks a lot like a spreadsheet. You have records and you have fields, or in spreadsheet lingo, you would have rows and columns, but in a database, each row is a record and each column is a field. And while you could put data directly into a back-end database and edit it, it's just not very efficient. And if you are going to work with multiple users, you would have a conflict trying to work in a single copy of the database at the same time. So that's where split databases come into play, and you would have a front-end application similar to this parts application. Okay, so we'll come back and look at this a little bit more in detail, but this is the same database that I just showed you, a simple 22 records, and that will be in the parts blog. So when you go to parts blog and you select the download tab, you can download this database and play with it. And there's an optional parts front end, this application here. It's not required to have a working database in Altium, but it just makes your life a lot simpler and more efficient to get your work done. So let's take a look again at some of the features. So anyway, it supports Excel import and exports. That means that you could import Excel bombs into the database and scrub those parts and then back annotate them to your designs or schematics to clean up your projects. You can easily make integrated libraries from a database library. I think I mentioned already we could clean up the bill of materials. Parts front end, the application that I was showing you earlier, supports both access databases locally on your company network drives, and it also supports MySQL bases that could be on your company local network drives, or they could be a remote cloud database, MySQL database on, for example, Amazon Web Services. I have a few customers that are using Amazon Web Services. We'll take a look at those later. And of course, you can use the parts application to do library cleanup work. And if you really would like to migrate to Altium 365 components, one of the things you have to consider is that the data that you put into Altium 365 managed components will only be as good as the data was when you migrated it. So it's a garbage in, garbage out sort of problem. Again, the quality of the library that you create in Altium 365 will be directly related to the quality of the database that you imported. Anyway, parts also supports Tortoise Git and Tortoise SVN. It has a GUI integration to that. We'll take a look at that later. And then lastly, I'd say that parts is a great return on investment, especially for making capacitors, resistors, inductors. I'll try to demonstrate that shortly. So why don't we take a quick look at the parts front end, and then we'll come back to some of these key features. Okay. So in my particular case, I've already downloaded the parts front end and I've installed it. That's pretty simple to do. Again, you would just go to parts blog, select the download tab, download, and after you've downloaded it, you would simply extract the files onto a drive where you have read-write permissions. That could be your desktop or your C drive, but just be sure you have read-write permissions wherever you're placing it. If you place it under program files, for example, you might find out that you don't have read-write permissions on your machine there, depending on if you are the administrator of that machine or you're working at a company where the IT department is the administrator and you're just a user. But anyway, you can extract those files into a folder, again, where you have read-write permissions. And the first thing I recommend you do is run the security fix. The security fix will allow you to execute and run the code in the parts front end. It's a VBA application. It has several modules of code and macros involved in it, several forms, but all of these forms and stuff, a lot like your smartphone, will be transparent to the user. For the most part, you're going to be working out of this main form 99% of the time. Okay, so let's take a look at how parts can really save you a lot of time, especially in what I was referring to as a great return on investment, because parts will allow you to spend a lot less time creating library parts and more time designing your boards. So I think it's probably pretty intuitive, but just looking straight across the buttons at the top, we can see we can create new records. We can use make like to create similar records. We can view records or edit records. Notice when I toggle this, that you see this red square here. That means we're in a view-only mode. We cannot edit the records. So if we type in here, we don't have to worry about accidentally changing a record. If we need to edit the records, we can select the edit button. It should give us a green light letting us know that we can make changes and edit in here. Save is exactly what it looks like. You're just saving any changes you've made to this record. You can delete a record. Also, it's a default to not delete the record, so you'll have to make a little more effort to reach over there and hit yes. Try to keep you from doing something you really don't want to do. There's also an intuitive filter in parts front end for sorting and filtering the data in the database. It's intelligent cascaded filter. For example, if you select capacitors and then maybe it's a radial can, notice that there's not one k-ohm, such thing as a k-ohm capacitor. Well, it's already been filtered too. You just need to drop down the list and you would see that your only thing in your list is parts that actually are in the database. Let's try that again with resistors, for example, and we'll go to 0402, and in our list would be the resistors available. Of course, this is just a short list because in this demo we only have 22 records, and I want to give the users an opportunity to add their own records to the demo database. Also, keep in mind that when I keep using the word demo database, when you download parts, you're receiving a free database solution for Altium for free. This parts front end is not necessary to have a database application in Altium. It just makes the job a lot easier. It's completely optional. So anytime you spent learning to use a database here, if you're interested in databases, will be well spent regardless of whether you decide to purchase a copy of the parts front end or not. So let's get back to looking at how you can use the parts front end to quickly create another part. So one of the things we can do for this part, for example, we've saved a link already over to DigiKey, the supplier. If we click on the shopping cart, we'd go straight away to DigiKey and take us to that part. And if we wanted to create another 1 k-ohm resistor, I mean, we don't need a duplicate, but just to show you that we create make like, and we'll use the same footprint and symbol again. So we don't have to remake our resistor symbol, and we know it's the same footprint because it's another 0402. So all we need to do is drag and drop to this black hat here from the DigiKey header, and that would fill in our data for us. No typing required, and you've quickly created another part. So it took me more time to talk it through the demonstration than it does to do it. It takes me about 15 to 20 seconds to create another resistor. Of course, some of the features built into parts and you'll find in the configuration. One of them is the save button option is to alert the user if there's a duplicate part. Also, you've got alerts if if the part's not row hosted. These are options that you can choose or not choose to use. Anyway, we'll get into those options more at a later date. So anyway, when we select save, notice that we're notified right away that we've tried to enter a duplicate record into the database. And that's a big time saver in itself, because we don't need to be spending our time adding duplicate parts into the database. So you notice it was already filtered down, and the most recent part that we just created was right here at the top. So after selecting OK, it's pretty easy to do a delete and delete that record that's not necessary. At this point, you'll see that we've filtered the records down to exactly the part number we were looking for. So we know now when we look in our components panel in Altium, for example, this part has got an ID of 30,011. If we were to go to our components panel where we've already installed the library, I'll just take a quick look at that. So we've installed the library here under the Install tab, Install. And if we select that library, you may recall, I believe that was 30,011. So there's our 1K ohm resistor. And also there's some scripts in parts. So you may have noticed that, again, we were here at 30,011, but let's scroll ahead. So I'm going to do a show all. And so let's say we're here at 30,019. And if we've enabled our scripts, so I'll enable them, they're not enabled now. So these scripts can be found in the download. And if you install those, you can place the parts selected from the parts front end. For example, here we have this 5.6 film capacitor. I would just go to the Altium schematic, select place part, and there would be our 5.6 puff capacitor. Do that one more time. So this time we've got 100K ohm resistor. Back to Altium, place part. So there's our 100K ohm resistor. And also, if you want, you can assign a shortcut key there. Notice here I've got place part in with the N key. There's not a lot of keys, shortcut keys that are open in Altium, but N is one of them. So if I press N, there you go. We got another 100K ohm resistor. All right. Now, one of the huge advantages to using an access or a database library is that you only need one resistor symbol for hundreds of parts or thousands of resistors. So because you're using the same resistor every time, the wiring will be consistent, meaning that if we swap this resistor in here with another resistor, let's try, for example, see what's at 30,010. We can change our ID number. And this time we've picked ourselves up a capacitor. So we'd want to change the reference designator for that. But anyway, the idea is that if you were choosing another resistor, you could do that really quickly. For example, this is 100K ohm over here. It's 30,014. We go 30,014. And now we have a 100K ohm resistor. So that makes it really quick and easy to use find similar and select maybe all of your resistors in your project and quickly change them out to a different part value or a different part number. Here I would select all the 100Ks, for example. And if I wanted those to 100Ks to become 1K ohm, if I know what my ID number is or I've looked it up, we could just change it and I'm going to make that a resistor. So now they're all 1K ohm resistors. Anyway, that's one of the reasons that parts users have a big competitive advantage. So I'll get back into some of the key features for a minute. We can see that you can download parts onto your machine and be up and running in less than 5 minutes. You just simply download it, run the script that I showed you earlier so that the parts front end code can run. That would be the security fix. Then launch the parts front end. And of course, you would need to install your parts demo dblib library in Altium. And that was done through the components panel, file-based library, preferences, and then navigate to where you've installed the parts demo DB lib and hit install. And that would do it. That's all there is to getting started. So let's see what else is in there. I think I already mentioned there, I've showed you a little bit about the scripts. There's, in addition to the scripts to place part, another interesting script is what I call the tag part. You might select a part here in the schematic. You'd like to get back to that part or cross probe it into the parts database. You could select the tag part script, and then when you go to the parts front end, if you select tagged, it'll take you straight away to that part. From there you could choose to select another symbol or edit a symbol or cancel. And also notice that throughout the parts front end application, you'll find online help is just a click away up in the corner. Same thing here, like filter, just help away. Tools, help. You'll find help online easily and quickly. Also, there's quite a few videos, but the most recent help and relative, some of the videos are getting a bit outdated, but I try to keep the help links up to date, including configuration, stuff like that. Okay, let's get back into the presentation. So I also will include, I haven't uploaded it yet, but I'll include a BOM template that'll allow you to easily create professional looking BOMs like this one here. And that's, you can see looking at this BOM how consistent the capacitor descriptions are, and the inductors and the resistors. You know, they're by value, tolerance, wattage, package. And I like to list my packages both in English and metric. And that's because, as you know, like an 0201 could be a 0603 part. Where do I have one right here? Yeah, here's an 0201. Notice that's metric 0603. So it doesn't happen very often, but I've seen some people occasionally get confused between the 0603 metric and the 0603 in English, and they end up placing the wrong parts and ordering the wrong parts. So I like to be a little more specific and list both the metric and English number. But anyway, this is what you can expect when using parts. This bill of material was off a project that was using parts. You can see all the descriptions are consistent, clean. The footprints were listed for reference purposes. The manufacturer part numbers, a supplier link, a supplier name, and a supplier link, and a reference back to the library ID for the item that was used. Okay, so parts was designed using best known industry practices, so they're built in. As I just showed you, you can create clean and consistent bill of materials, and you're going to spend a lot less time doing library work, leaving you more time to design your boards. I've showed you that you can do drag and drop, so no data entry is required. Again, I think you recall that we can do a drag and drop, so we can do a new record here, for example, come over to DigiKey, and just drop our data in there, no typing required. And also it gives parts users have a competitive advantage over people who use other methods for their libraries because they spend a lot less time. And so when if you're an independent contractor and you're bidding on a job, you can, where another user might have to bid 20 to 40 hours for library work, you might only need to bid 5 hours or less, maybe 10. It just depends on how proficient you get to be with the parts front end. But you can see you can very quickly and easily create similar parts. Along those lines, I really want to drive that point home. So what I want to do is show you also that the parts configuration is scalable, and you can easily load other configurations. So I'm going to load a MySQL configuration. You can see the drivers, MySQL ODBC 8.0, and it's on a local host. That means it's on my local network. I'll hit apply. What we're going to do is we're going to notice that this parts front end is also available in a light and a dark theme. I'm going to go ahead and switch that to the dark theme for a moment. That's right here under dark color theme, and I'll hit apply. I think that probably shows a little better on Altium's background. But again, using the filter, what we can do is, I just want to take a quick look at how many resistors are in this database. So this is kind of a little shortcut key here, right here in the middle, in that it puts 2 wildcards in there and puts your cursor in between them. That gives you a spot to be ready to start typing. And of course, there's drop-down menus, and there's type ahead is also supported, so. All right, so anyway, the idea was to find out how many resistors in this database, which has, let me clear that for a moment. In this database, it has a total of 2,716 parts currently. And again, if we were to just take a look using a wildcard and look at all the resistors in the database, we would see we have 631. So the point is, you see in a database that had about 2,700 parts, more than 600 of them, almost 1/4 of the library is in resistors. And what about if we did the same thing looking at capacitors? So we'll find out that we have 433. So remember that was 600 and something plus 400. We have over 1,000 parts that are nothing but resistors and capacitors. And for those resistors and capacitors, we only needed one symbol to create one symbol one time and just enter the parametric data. And the same thing for 0402 footprints. You would only need to create the footprint once, obviously. But unlike some integrated libraries and symbol concentric libraries, you would have to create this symbol. If you have 600 parts, you would need to create 600 symbols, and you'd want to be sure each symbol was created the same, and the data presented in each symbol saved in the library would be the same. And that's where the database library really shines. It takes the headache out of building consistent parts. As I showed you in the bill of material earlier, you can get very clean, very consistent looking bill of material and data when your data is derived from a database library. All right. So anyway, that's why you get competitive advantages, and also parts is scalable by design. Earlier I was showing you that in the demo we loaded an Access database, and now we're in a MySQL database. Well, the transition from Access to MySQL is very simple, and it can be done in about 15 minutes. You would just export your data for MySQL. You would generate some scripts for MySQL. And then after you have installed MySQL on your machine and created a connection, here's an example of MySQL with a table in it. This is this MySQL database that we're looking at in the parts front end. It has 2,700 and some records in it. Notice the last record's 30,819. So again, if we double click here in the ID, by the way, we can toggle, if we use show all, we can toggle to the first and last record quickly. And that's handy because a lot of times when you're editing records, you're always working on the last record because it's the last one you just created. So when you create a new record, the ID is just incremented +1 and you're ready to go. And the other thing that using a automated incrementing ID will do is it will save you the time and trouble required to create a company part number. That's not to say if your company is using company part numbers, a lot of times what you might find out, and that's what this material control number is that it's most efficient to go ahead and create your library parts, get them into a design, and have a design review. And once the schematics are passing through design review, and you know those parts are going to stay in the design, that would be the time that you want to go create company part numbers, and then you can add those back into the database. And that can be done simply by exporting using tools and export the data to Excel. For example, we'll just open that real quick. We'll just let it go wherever. But so there we've quickly exported the data, and you could do the same thing for a bill of material, and you could submit that to the configuration controller, to your PLM or configuration department. And once the company part numbers are assigned, you come back in under tools and do an import, and then you could map that field in. That field would get mapped into the database. For example, this is the field, the database. There we go. So we would just link our data over, and if you didn't want to update all the fields, you could do just the manufacturing part number, which is your company part number. And also this MCN field, there's an option in parts that can be renamed to your company name. So this could be your company name. It could be, like if your company was on Ramp Wireless, you could put ORW there, or if your company name was, IBM, you could put IBM in there. That's just one of the configuration options under the user-defined fields. You could change this to ORW, for example, if your company name was ORW. Hit apply. And the other thing you would have to do before that would take effect is you would have to go into the parts backend database and rename this field to MCM, and then it would be good to go. I'll just set that back to MCN for now. All right, see if I can get back on track here. Wrap this up. So anyway, also if you're looking to integrate, the parts database again is scalable design, because as I was also showing you, you can hot switch between any number of configurations. For example, you could create a DB lib that is nothing but resistors, another one that's nothing but capacitors, if you wish to, and you can have as many libraries as you want to connect to. For example, here I will connect to a library that's on Amazon Web Services. So here we've got Amazon Web Services, and I'm gonna instead of that, I'm gonna hook on to Amazon Web Services here. That's on the West Coast, because I'm on the West Coast. The other one was on the East Coast, and we can still work with that too. But it's a little bit quicker to work on the one from the West Coast because I'm on the West Coast. And also, by the way, this particular customer that I created this library for, Totem, is customers in engineers are in Canada and in San Diego, and because it's being hosted on Amazon Web Services, engineers from anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the United States or around the world, can collaborate and work together through this database library. All right, so anyway, that's one of the things I meant by scalable. You could start out with this simple demo database library and access, and you can scale that up to MySQL. If you prefer, you can easily migrate your library to Altium 365 managed components. Let's take a look at doing that for a moment. To do that, you would just simply select your library. It's loaded. You drop down your menu and do an import. When Altium first created this feature, they used to refer to it as migrating the library. So excuse me if I still say the word migrating, because now they use the word importer. When importing a library or migrating, I always recommend that you select the Advanced tab. Excuse me for just a moment, I need a drink. And look for any errors that you might have. Notice we have a question mark here. And also, if you look in the messages and hit validate, you'll see if there's any problems associated with the library. Notice that it says there's a duplicate in the components. It says the symbol name could not be empty. So we got a couple of problems there. So why don't we go back there and see what we can do to fix that really quick. So one of the features also in parts is that we can quickly restore a library. So let me load that demo library again. I'm going to load the same library that we're trying to import there, the demo. Okay. And take another look at that. I don't think there's any issues. Let's verify files, which will also check and see if all of that tells us by verifying all the records that all of the footprints are inside these libraries, and the libraries are actually present in our symbols and footprints folders. So in our symbols, we just verified the symbols are there. We read each symbol file and verified that the references did in fact exist in there. So what I'm going to do right now is close my library importer for just a moment, and I'm going to do a refresh in the library panel just to make sure that it's up to date, and then I'm going to do a import library. Okay, again, I would advise using the Advanced tab and check the Messages panel after you do a validate. All right, so it's telling us that we've got a duplicate. 30,011 is duplicated with components by part choices. So let's take a look at that. 30,011. All right. I do recall that earlier I was demonstrating to you that we could make a duplicate part, and there it is there. So we do in fact have a duplicate part, and if we would hit save, we would get our warning. And also, if you've scrolled away from your records in parts, and you just want to know in general if you have any duplicates in your library, there's also a macro over here that you could run to look for duplicate manufacturers, and it would just list them all. Okay. And we could delete that duplicate from here, or we could delete it from the parts front end. Notice because we deleted it in the table, now the parts front end is showing deleted. So we just select show all to refresh it. Let's see what else was in there. So those were actually the two duplicates, because it was the duplicate was 30,011 and 30,023. So let's see what happens if we hit validate. It's still showing the duplicate, and that's because Altium took a snapshot of the library when I started the integrator. So we're going to want to do another refresh. That'll should take away 30,023 from the library choices. We'll import. Anyway, I guess it's not going quite as smoothly as I wanted in the demonstration, but at least it's very realistic, because these are the types of problems that users can run into, and you need to be aware of them. So anyway, we've got a message here. We're going to do a validate. And notice this time all we see is component 30,000 is an undefined type. And that's because in my database library, I like to use a part that I call new. And new part becomes a template. For example, if we were to load our footprint and edit it, notice that I already have predefined my preferred mechanical layers, component outlines. I've got a polarity dot that I can use again, and I've got a target. So I'll probably want to reuse all this kind of information in a new component. So then I would just simply rename the component, and then I would do a save as, and save it as a new name. And that's the purpose of having that, because this way, if all of these engineers and designers on my team always start in new parts using the new PCB lib, then we're all on the same page, all using the same mechanical layers. In my case, I prefer to use layers 13 for the component outline and mechanical layer 15 for the courtyard. And using those layers, by the way, if you're not already familiar, will give you the greatest compatibility with other users and Altium content. So I highly recommend using those. All right, so let's get back to our migrator. So we had a warning there. That's what the whole new thing was about. So I do have a part type that I created called new. So I'm just going to go ahead and sign that. It's just that when Altium read in the library, they do a very good job of analyzing the descriptions and determining the component type. But in this case, Altium wasn't expecting for me to have a component type of new. So it didn't get in there automatically. Anyway, now we can do a validate, and we can see that we should get no error messages in here. I do kind of wish Altium would put a successful green bar in here, no issues found or something. But anyway, seeing the message panel clean is what we want, and then we can import the records. So it takes about maybe 40 seconds or so to import these 22 records. While that's happening, we'll take a quick look back at our data sheet and see what else we can discuss. Anyway, there's also an easy dblib to integrated library solution by using Altium's offline integrated library maker. I'll try to demonstrate that one for you. Get back here, it's still running, just about done. And also, there's an easy dblib integration with Tortoise Git, which is very popular with people who like to use version-controlled libraries, but may not want to use Altium's managed 365 components. Also, there's integration with svn dblib, which I've put here that's not recommended. I don't recommend it because it's too slow and troublesome compared to using Git. Git is fast and efficient because Git creates a snapshot of all the footprints and symbols on each user's front-end local machine, and because you're running out of your local machine, it's extremely fast. Whereas svn dblib, you might be pulling footprints and symbols from a cloud or a network drive that could be over a VPN connection, and it's very slow. Anyway, let's see how we're doing on that library migration. It's done. We've migrated our 23 parts. You could open the log if you like and look, and you should see that you have a lot of success, or in some cases, if you have another capacitor, remember you only need one capacitor symbol, or you only need one resistor symbol. So that's why you're seeing already created, because we didn't need another resistor symbol or capacitor symbol. So we can close the library migrator, and if we go look in our components panel, we should be able to see those 23 parts. Okay, so they'll look very similar to the database library if we just compare that quickly, except it's in blue, but you'll still see your footprint symbol, your links, your supplier data. So database libraries and managed components are pretty similar in the features that are there. There's a few slight differences, but they're very similar. Again, with managed components, you can create what's called revision control. But a lot of users question whether revision control is really necessary for libraries. I mean, we've used libraries for circuit boards and PCBs for 50+ years without creating any revision controlled libraries. Some of us use version controlled libraries because version control places the blame on the user, and it keeps a snapshot of all the previous versions of the component in case you need to revert back to the component. So when you think about it, I mean, most of us, and you're welcome to use revision control, but I'm just going to take a moment to explain why you may or may not find it to be so advantageous. Like, for example, when we have schematics or drawings, we do need to have revisions on them to keep track of what revision of the product that we've released into the market. But for example, if I were to create a new footprint tomorrow and I decided to move the polarity dot, or I decided to use rounded pads instead of rectangle pads, let's get a part up here for a moment. So if I decided to use rounded pads instead of rectangular pads, make this an old rectangle here for a moment. You know, a few years ago, all of us used rectangle pads. Now we like to use rounded pads. And a few years ago, there was no component courtyards. Does that mean the designs released before we used rounded pads are bad? No. Do those boards need reworked? No. Do they need to be updated? No. Because if you're in production and your product's been successful in production, if it's not broke, it don't need fixed. So anyway, that's kind of like where my thoughts are on some library management. I think revision control is a little bit overkill. I do like version control, but in reality, what I found after many years of designing circuit boards, that when we do find a problem with a footprint or a symbol, it's usually found during the review process. We simply go into the library, we correct it, and then push it to the board that we're designing. And like I said, if the other boards that you may have designed years ago, if they're already in production and there's no known issues, well, it doesn't matter. This part that you're fixing for this board in the library now isn't relevant to the boards that are already in production because they work fine. So anyway, that's a little bit about my spin on that. You're welcome to use revision controlling if you like. Again, anytime that you have even a database library, it would just simply be a matter of going tools, update from libraries, and that would update the entire project to the latest components in your library. So it would be that simple. And also, like, let's take a look at this. If we even placed a component from Altium 365, here's this resistor, and notice that it tells us here that it doesn't even know if it's up to date. In fact, what we need to do is, well, actually it says up to date. So my bad on that. So let's take that and just take it through the loop for a moment. Let's say that we did an edit here. Okay, we'll say okay. All right, so we know it's not up to date anymore. Altium doesn't know it's not up to date. Okay, but you can see it's been mangled. Okay, so I'm not so sure revision control bought you anything there. We can hit this. It still says up to date, but it's mangled. Let's change the footprint to. Well, let's not change. Let's change the manufacturer part number. Say OK. Is that up to date? Sure, still looks up to date. But then let's look at if we were to do a update from libraries. Notice it because I had that part selected. We'll hit finish. So very similar to what we did with the database library. Since we updated it, we've restored the data. And in fact, one of the things that you have to watch young and inexperienced engineers from doing is that when you have a central library, they might have a tendency not to want to go back and correct the library. They'll just try to correct something right here, like maybe they'll change this to a 5% part. But that's not correct because it doesn't match the part number and it doesn't match what's in the library. When corrections need to be made, they need to be made at the library, and the library needs to be pushed onto the board. Hacking at parts on the board is a good way to get yourself into trouble, which is the value of having either managed components or either a centralized database. All right, so I think that pretty much wraps up the discussion for the overview of what parts can do for you. Please take a look at parts. You can download parts over at PCBpartsblogspot.com. And just select the download tabs, download it, give it an install. If you have any questions, select the contact parts tab, and from there you can fill in your name and email address. Leave a question for me or a comment if you like. And if you'd like to move forward with purchasing parts application keys, you can request those. And regarding the pricing of parts application keys, you can find those on the blog. Also, so under application keys, and it just removes the 30-day trial version. But anyway, you can work with the parts front end for up to 30 days or up to 100 components and get a good evaluation on that. And as always, if you would like a demo, please feel free to contact me. I'll give you a free online demonstration, and I promise you will not get any follow-up emails or sales pressure. I don't follow up with people. You simply get a demo. If you're interested in parts, you need to contact me and request additional information or request a quote. We don't follow up with sales trying to pressure people who've been given a demo into purchasing the product. So thanks for taking a look at parts with me, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And if nothing else, you can get yourself a free turnkey database, and it's completely up to you whether or not you want to purchase the optional, user-friendly, and intuitive parts front-end application. Thanks again. Have a great day. I'll be leaving a link down below in the video where you can find a link to the parts blog. And also, if you want to learn more about database libraries, by all means, please subscribe to this channel, and we'll be posting more videos soon. Thank you.